I don't know how many times I've read Ulysses, more than 25. I counted it once and it was 25. That was a while ago. So it's
Wow.
more than 30. Well, yeah, I'm old. You'll see.
What is the most memorable conversation you've had about Goldie?
Well, the most memorable conversation wasn't an actual conversation. It was a virtual conversation.
Okay.
And it kind of led me on a path that I hadn't expected going on. Um, an acquaintance of mine, a virtual acquaintance of mine, was selecting a dissertation topic.
Okay.
And she asked me to read a couple of articles, one of which was a 40-year-old essay by Joanne Isaac about um, quantum physics, perhaps, and and Joyce. And so I read that, and its scope was, it was just a short paper, although it was academic. It dealt with some issues that kind of inspired me, and I ended up writing 5 essays, I guess, about topics related to Einstein and Picasso and Joyce.
Wow.
So that was the most inspiring exchange, and it wasn't directly related or exclusively related to Mr. Bloom, but he certainly was a part of it.
Yeah.
So the article that I was asked to read, it talked quite a bit about Lestrygonians
Okay.
and about the Dunsink marker and clock.
Mhm.
So it suggests time travel. Uh, I find a lot more interesting stuff actually in Wandering Rocks. So
Okay.
the first thing I wrote was a review of her paper,
Mhm.
and then I started to write about different aspects. You said I could bring props,
Yeah.
so I don't. Although I do have some real props, but I won't bore you with. I have an eye patch, and I have a ramekin from Plumtree Potted Meats, and I have a couple of bars of Sweeney lemon scented soap, and I have a blackthorn walking stick. But I didn't bother you with any of those. Instead, I wanted to show you the books that got me started on this pilgrimage. So this is called Einstein and Picasso by Arthur I. Miller. Nobody married Marilyn Monroe during the writing of this book, and the subtitle is Space, Time, and the Beauty That Causes Havoc. And
Wow.
Joyce is not, I don't think he's mentioned at all, or if he's mentioned once, but he's not really essential to that discussion. But when you look at that in light of Thomas Jackson Rice's book, Joyce, Chaos, and Complexity, it's pretty easy to tie the ideas together.
Wow.
So I could go a little bit into history if you could stand that.
Oh, for sure. Whatever you want to talk about. Sounds interesting.
So yeah, one of the questions you wanted to explore is who is Joyce and what
Mm.
is Ulysses? I don't know who Joyce is. I know who Stephen Dedalus is, and
Okay.
I know
Who's
who Fanny thought Joyce was, his brother
Mhm.
was, and who Nora thought Joyce was, and Frank Budgeon, who that was more like hero worship, I think. But that's okay. Everybody needs a retinue, right? Um, I think so. I don't think there's any clear picture. I think Joyce didn't intend that Stephen Dedalus would be him, but he's a character. In fact, Joyce may be a character played by Joyce. But but the
Wow.
thing where I think I get the best glimpse of who Joyce really
Mhm.
is in Giacomo Joyce. And
Okay.
why more people don't read Giacomo Joyce, I don't understand, because it's only 16 pages. That's where I think I get the best picture of who Joyce is,
Okay.
because he's completely candid about all his flaws. At the end of the 16 pages, he reverts to being defensive, and he becomes the victim in
Mhm.
this non-love affair.
Wow.
it's never consummated. She has no interest in this old man, and man of 25, and so she goes off to college and gets married, and her husband spends a great deal of time, as does she, trying to defend her from people who want to know about her love affair with James Joyce.
Wow.
There's that. So that's who I think.
Yeah.
That's as much as I know about who Joyce. I believe that Ulysses is not just one day in the life of one or three people.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe it's a day in the life of modernity. It's the story about, I think it's drawn from the passage from the security, the certainty of positivism into this new world where there are no rules.
Okay.
So, in just to pick round dates. So 300 BC, Euclid writes the geometry.
Okay.
And we are absolutely convinced that Euclidean geometry is precise, it's scientific, and it represents reality.
Mm-hmm.
Then, sometime around 1250 AD,
mm-hmm.
Catechism has taken form. And we are, again, absolutely certain that we understand everything there is to know about the cosmos. And then sometime around 1850, this Frenchman, Auguste Comte, comes up with positivism. And positivism says that seeing is believing, that in order for anything to be real, you have to be able to see it and prove that you've seen it. So the proof can be mathematical, the proof can be physical, but there has to be positive, concrete proof. Okay. And then things start to fall apart. And they start to fall apart in the 19th century, in the middle of the 19th century. Comte lives from about the beginning of the 19th century to about the middle, and it's about the middle where positive becomes sacrosanct. And then Darwin ruins everything. The combination of Darwin and Nietzsche ruin everything, because Darwin says all the things that we thought were concrete, unrefutable, irrefutable facts from the Bible now come into question. And Nietzsche, Nietzsche gets blamed for saying God is dead, but he really didn't say God was dead. He said other people were convinced that God was dead, and there was no evidence that God was alive. So how do you create an ethical existence when the rug is pulled out from under you? That's what Nietzsche tries to say. But whether he means to say that God is dead, whether he establishes that God is dead, is completely beside the point. The point is that all the things that were certain, the Euclid, the Catechism, and positivism, now start to come into question. So Euclid is a problem because suddenly all these things that are not visible, all these things that you can't depict in two-dimensional graphs, they don't, there are lots and lots of examples now in the mid and late 19th century that tell us that just isn't the case. We have X-rays, we have radioactive materials that have absolute effects. You can sterilize a lab rat through exposing them to Rankin's rays. But there's no mathematical proof for this. So what do we do with that? We know that it works, but positivists would reject it.
Okay.
All Einstein theories are based upon thought experiments. There's no positive proof of anything that Einstein says until there's kind of a suggestion that isn't really a proof, but it's acceptable to most people by 1919. Okay. But that's, he has his miracle year in 1905. And he puts into question the Newtonian physics. You know, this was concrete. This was absolute. And
Yeah.
people, and the effect that that has on people, you know, is devastating. Certain what the elements are of morality and science, you know, the physical sciences, the social sciences, and now it's all called into question. That's what Bloom and the other two protagonists too, but we, you know, half the book is Bloom's. So and he seems to talk more about science than even Daedalus does. He's always wrong, not always wrong. He's wrong 40% of the time, maybe. But who wouldn't be, given the fact that all the facts have been torn up? Who wouldn't be wrong frequently? So so that's what Joyce has done. Joyce has taken, I think most people, if asked what Joyce did that was revolutionary, they would say it's stream of consciousness. But stream of consciousness had been experimented with before Joyce. Desjardins is who Budgeon attributes Joyce's stream of consciousness to, but some people think that that it's the Brontes who do it. Some people say that it's Flaubert who introduced the stream of consciousness. Well, what they started to do, I don't think they really did what Joyce did, because Joyce does it. He does it as he is an absolute master. Although there's so little experience. I don't know how you become a virtuoso in stream of consciousness when so little of it has done before him. But he does his three concurrent protagonists, all with their own voice, all with their own internal voice, that are completely distinct. Wow, right?
Yeah, wow. It's wild.
It's this book. Why do people love or hate talking about Bloom? It's because Bloom is me. Bloom is everyone. We're all kind of floundering, trying to decide what modernity means. And we don't even accept that 1904 or 1922 could be modern times. But in fact, they are. We have no more answers today than we had 100 years ago. So when you look at it in terms of the other two characters that I indict in this study, Einstein and Picasso. Einstein starts it, but then he stands back and puts his hands up, and he has this theoretical ideas that are magnificent, but he's really a very conservative character. And some say that so is Joyce and so is Picasso.
Okay.
Picasso's science is really kind of radical. He starts to experiment with motion pictures, with movies. And this is space-time that he's experimenting with. And so is Joyce. And so is Joyce. If you think about Wandering Rocks, and you think about the black-backed man who is Bloom, right? The timing of his appearance and disappearance doesn't seem to sync with our idea of time. But of course, our idea of time is flawed. You know, there's another, also in Wandering Rocks, there's a scene where you see in different sequences of time with different observers, you see Molly's arm reach out of the window and drop a coin to the beggar. The time doesn't match.
Wow.
We see Master Dignam, who mistakes himself in the mirror for another person. That's a quantum concept, I think. And it happens over and over and over, you know? And it happens, you know, not only does it happen in Wandering Rocks, it happens in Lestragonians, and it happens in the three chapters at the end of the book, the three episodes that belong to Molly. Picasso's taking these films and the perspective, the parallax, if you will, of the images that are on the film, change the image. It's the same person, but this is space-time. So they're traveling across the screen.
Okay.
And they change. Are you familiar with Demoiselles? Or Demoiselles d'Avignon? So Picasso's, maybe his most famous painting, there are five images of women. And the first four are standing, and the fifth one is squatting. And one of them has a baboon face, and one of them has a mask.
Okay. And
they're all sharp lines, because Picasso had gone to an exhibit of primitive art and saw these geometric shapes, and realized that the masks that showed human features as geometric shapes could also represent the way you look at an image. So if you think about Poldi, when he's examining the statue of Venus at the museum, he looks at it from every angle. He gets a different perspective. He sees different lines and different shapes. It's the same three-dimensional object, right? So that's what Einstein does. So Einstein takes these five images are one person. This is one woman who is moving through space-time. So if you think about, I never understood. I once tried to do an abstract painting, cubist, and it was a complete failure. It was just not naturalism. That's what it was, but it wasn't, because what you have to do is those things about, if you look at the nose, that's the best way to look at it. On one of Picasso's paintings, there would be three different triangles representing the nose. How can that be? Well, it's because the nose moved, or the observer moved. The perspective is different. That's the same. So Joyce and Picasso and Einstein are all preaching this observation that confounds the old positivism that says we understand everything there is to understand. Don't confuse things by bringing up new issues that you can't prove, because we can't prove what it. We know that it's there. We just can't tell you why. About Joyce before reading his work. My education before college was in parochial schools, so I didn't know a lot about Joyce. Perhaps I had a vague idea that he was a dirty man, but that's maybe all I knew. And ironically, I graduated from high school. I went in the Navy, and I got married, and I had a family, and I went to school at night on the VA, and I went for 13 years. I wasn't a quick study, and never will be. So anyway, after maybe the year before I got my undergraduate degree, I took an honors course in Irish literature, and that's when I was introduced to Joyce. And I can't even tell you. I know I read a portrait, and I'm sure I read The Dead, but I couldn't swear to it that was, but not the complete Dubliners. A sample of Stephen Hero, and nothing from Ulysses, I'm pretty sure. Wow. But then subsequent to that course, I took another course that was purely Joyce, And there we wrote, that's when I was introduced to Ulysses. The instructor that I had for that course was Eileen Kennedy. Or she didn't take final orders, but she had been a nun. So here, I knew nothing about Joyce until I met this nun who taught me everything I was still learning about Joyce. So,
Wow.
yeah, it kind of unusual, but and she was a very spiritual woman too, but she had a sense of humor, and that's and that's what Ulysses, at least that's what Bloom is all about. If you can't laugh at Ulysses, you don't understand it, right?
No, I totally agree. Right?
So that's when I first became acquainted with Joyce.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many times I've read Ulysses, more than 25. I counted it once and it was 25. That was a while ago.
Wow.
So it's more than 30. Well, yeah, I'm old. You'll see.
Do you like read it every year or what though? Like that still seems like a lot.
10 years, I did read it every year, and I wanted to finish it on Bloomsday.
Oh, that's very nice.
So, but when so I have a website and I write about it. So I do read it, but I don't read it from cover to cover. I read it an episode at a time. Right now, I'm updating notes and themes and other things about the episodes. And so over the course of, I've done 3 updates so far, and I'll do the next 15 over the next 15 months. So that'll be another read. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, you would think I would have better things to do with my time, but I don't. I haven't found anything better to do.
It's a pretty good, I don't know, it's an enjoyable thing to do. I don't know.
It is, and it doesn't get empty. It never empties.
Mm-hmm.
There are always new ways to look at it.
True. Yeah. I find I have a like sort of side note question. Like, do you read it or have you ever read it in a group? Because I don't know, I found I'm on my, like, I'm reading it for the 3rd time right now. We're about halfway through, and my 2nd and this 3rd time have been in groups. And I don't know, I just find that like, it makes it like I can see myself reading it every year. If I was reading it with different groups every time and getting new people's thoughts.
You would get different input every time you read it. The 10 years ago, I suppose, I did a reading circle. I started a reading circle, and there were, we probably started with 11 and finished with 6 people. That was enlightening. When COVID descended, I had just started that for a 2nd time. And 6 first-time readers were going to read it. We met once to introduce ourselves, and then COVID descended. So now I can either give this up, or I can create digital media and share it. And that's how it started. So I started to put together, I just slapped notes together, and they were a mess, The first few were just horrible. They were just like the handwritten notes that I had from the first time I did it, and I just copied them down and put them out there. And then I started to organize it a little bit, and it's a little bit better than it was in February of what? Of 20? Was that 20?
Yeah, 2020 was when COVID started. Almost 2 years all the way.
So now I don't even know if any of those people ever finished it. I suspect that one of them is still getting updates on the website. So I think maybe he finished it. You do get consumed when you can't leave the house. You do become consumed with things that are inside them. So yeah, there was some of that. I'm sure I did more work during lockdown than I would have done otherwise, but maybe not a lot more. I mean, now that I could, venture out without a great deal of trepidation. I still do this a lot. I do this probably a little obsessively. Yeah. So yeah. So during the 2nd year of the lockdown, I guess I started before, um, just before 2021 started. I decided to write essays about the Dubliners.
Oh,
So I did that, and then at some point after I finished the first cut of the Ulysses notes, then I wrote essays every week about Giacomo Joyce.
okay.
So
Wow.
5 essays or something related to that. So, and then I do book reviews on for people that that I'm in contact with who have written about Joyce, or sometimes even about other things. And then just recently, I started to write about Bloom as Virgil. So,
okay.
if Dante is an inspiration to Joyce, I started kind of an academic read of the Divine Comedy, and I find a lot of connections between Bloom as Daedalus's guide and Virgil Dante's guide.
Okay, I hadn't thought of that before.
So tomorrow, I think you'll like it. Tomorrow, I'm posting about the three violent creatures that block Dante's ascent to heaven, and he has to go to hell. So there's a leopard, and there's a lion, and there's a she-wolf.
Okay.
So my take on this, don't tell anybody because nobody knows until tomorrow. My take on this is that the leopard is Millie Bloom. She's a little wild. She's a little erratic. He's really concerned about her. She's intemperate. And that's the first 3 circles of hell are about the intemperate.
Oh, okay.
And then the second 3 are about violence and unnaturalism. And this Bloom's problem with his own proclivities.
Okay.
No? So that's the second 3 circles. And then the third 3 are betrayal. Different betrayal, like simony, but also like in the very pit of hell. And that's model fidelity.
Whoa. Okay. Dang, well, I'll be excited to read that.
One of the treats of my Bloomsday experiences was that first reading circle that I talked about. One of the guys who was in the group cooked a beef heart for us.
Oh, wow.
So we had a Bloomsday feast. And of course, it had to be, the inner organs of beast and fowl. And so I ate a beef heart. And it wasn't.
Did you eat it with relish?
No relish, no. It was surprisingly tender. He cooked it in a pressure cooker. It wasn't bad. I really expected to spit it into my napkin, but I didn't have to. So there was that. Another Bloomsday, I went to Bloomsday on Broadway in New York, which is a really kind of professional, maybe too professional for my taste. It's really Broadway, I was sent to Dublin on business. I worked my whole life in information technology. So in 1996, I think I was sent to Dublin on business, and I worked it so that my flight out wasn't until Sunday, and I had Saturday where I could fool around. So I went in and I walked the Dublin streets, and I was trying to find the Joyce Center. Well, the Joyce Center is on North Great George's Street. Well, I was on South Great George's with the very same numbers, but I was lost for a good amount of time, and it was almost. I gave up and I decided to take a taxi. So I grabbed a taxi, and the cab driver, I don't know where he was from. He had to be from somewhere way in the north because I couldn't understand a word he said. He might have been speaking Gaelic for all I understood. But anyway, so he got me to he got me to the Joyce Center.
Mhm.
And, it happened to be the day. Now, Ireland is not a great football country.
Okay.
They play Gaelic sports. They don't fool around with the strangers' sports.
Okay.
Well, Ireland is never a great soccer powerhouse, but this year they had played their way. If they tied in the match that was taking place that day, if they tied that day, they were in the European Championships in the tournament. So this was kind of a big deal since that never happened. I walked into the Joyce Center, and the curate, the kid who was working behind the counter, his face just dropped to see me because it's almost time for them to close, and he wants to watch the football. He doesn't want to have to deal with one more idiot asking stupid questions. He just he looked at me and just melted. Well, an older man, how dare I call somebody an older man, but he was older than me at that time, who was behind the counter with him. And he said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of him. You go on." So the curate leaves. Well, the guy who decided to take care of me was Ken Monahan. That's Joyce's nephew. That was his last living nephew.
Really?
The guy who started the Joyce Center. And I got to talk to him for a little while, and he knew my graduate advisor, Eileen. He knew about her, he knew about her writing. Mm-hmm. So it was a magical day.
Wow.
And then took the public transit back to the hotel where I was staying in Dunleary, and so I think Ireland won all they needed was a tie, but I think they actually won that match. When the dart got to the stadium, and people pushed me out onto the platform where a spontaneous party had started. Well, maybe they didn't have to push me that hard, frankly, but I mean, there was quite a celebration. It was the perfect day. And then when I got back on the train, I took the train not to Dunleary where I was, but to Bray, to the next stop. Mm-hmm. And I walked through the rain to the Martello Tower, and it was the best day of my life.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, so wow.
Those are probably good reasons for loving Joyce too. I think I've read all the published works. There might be some poetry that I haven't read, but okay. I've read Poems Penny Each and Chamber Music. I read Exiles once. I read Stephen Hero once, and I think everything else I've been through more than one or two times. I read Finnegan's Wake twice.
Wow.
But you asked, what didn't I finish? Mm-hmm. There are occasional writings that I haven't finished. I couldn't get through his paper on hoof and mouth disease. That's not like, I don't, normally I'll just kind of plow through it and force myself to look at every word anyway, even if I don't remember anything. I didn't finish that. And I think there were 2 articles about Dublin politics that I did not finish, but everything else, there are so many things in his writings mm-hmm. that are revolutionary. Mm-hmm. And I really I didn't talk about what I put in those essays about the quantum ideas, but really quickly, if you look at a portrait, what a portrait does that's revolutionary is that the voice of the narrator, it shifts from being an all-knowing, because positivism says we know everything. So there's an all-knowing deity, there's an all-knowing voice, and that translates in many cases into an all-knowing narrator, an omniscient narrator. Mm-hmm. And Joyce starts to play with the voice of the narrator. Uh-huh. The narrator becomes uncertain, and you even have the the Uncle Charles principle that Hugh Kenner talks about, where a character's flaws find their way into the voice of the narrator, his vocabulary, his mindset, and Flaubert did a little bit of that too, but so does Joyce. So that's that. In Dubliners, he plays with Euclidean geometry. He does. There are two schema, and each schema, you know, it took so long. It took 5 years, I think, for the book to be put together and finally published because of Richards, right? Mm-hmm. So that the publisher keeps delaying things, and the size of the collection goes. The original thought was that it would be 12, and it ends up being 15. And the original thought was that there would be 3 groups of stories, and it ends up being. If I got that right, it's the addition of social life that that's added. So there's a whole new category. So that the original capstone is Grace. So the story Grace has all the components from the stories that existed among the original 12. And then he has to redesign it with a new shape to this isosceles triangle, not a new shape, but a new size, and a new capstone. And that's where the dead comes from. But the idea of the gnomon, of the missing piece, and he doesn't give us the conclusion to any of those stories, really. Mm-hmm. He leaves us with an empty space, and that's what that gnomon is. In Euclidean geometry, that's what the gnomon is. It's a missing piece. If you had a parallelogram, you would have a smaller parallelogram that's cut out of the corner and left unoccupied. And that's what his stories do. They point us to this. And anyway, I won't go into baseball on you there. I won't go too much deeper. But he does that over and over again. And then there's all the quantum science in Ulysses, not just quantum science, but there's, you know, anyway. Wow. That's why he's great. And I mean, Finnegan's Wake, I don't really know enough to educate anybody about that. Have you heard a collection of performances, readings, and songs about Finnegan's Wake?
Oh, that's cool.
I did a reading for that a while ago, but it's really fun to listen to. And I mean, some of them are talented people that have written music to accompany Finnegan's Wake.